Actually, fear is not usually a pleasant feeling for anyone. However, it is a morbid sensation. And no matter how scared we feel at that moment, we have the strange feeling that we have to look. This is something that, for example, happens to many of us with horror movies, which very often use the typical based on true events to attract more attention from the viewer. Although it is true that these kinds of movies are often actually based on real stories or events, like the ones coming up. Get comfy, leave a like and comment, and enjoy the video. The Exorcist. I think there's little to say about this movie that isn't already known, since it's the most famous horror movie of all time. This movie by William Friedkin tells the story of the possession of Regan, a 12-year-old girl who is possessed by the demon Pazuzu after she played with a Ouija board she found in the basement of her house. However, the real story on which William based his movie is not about a girl, but about a boy from Maryland named Roland. In 1948, he began to notice a series of paranormal events, which gradually became more severe, to the point that his mother said she entered his room and saw the bed her son was lying on moving violently on its own, or how a family friend. He claimed that during a gathering, he saw the boy sitting in a chair and suddenly being thrown from his seat. These events led the family to seek spiritual help, and they claimed that when the priest arrived and met the boy shouted at him in Latin, "You that fizz, me that diabolu." Finally, the boy underwent 30 exorcism sessions, and when the last ritual was coming to an end, everyone present claimed that a loud noise was heard, and the boy gradually recovered and was able to return to his life. Normal, the orphan girl. Actually, in this case, first there was a movie based on a true story, and then a real case based on a movie. However, I decided to include this last one because the real case actually seems more like fiction than the movie itself. The Orphan is a 2009 movie in which a family adopts a girl who is hiding a dark secret. And behind her sweet appearance, there was actually an adult woman with mental problems. But a few days ago, a news story came out, which tells the story of Natalia, a Ukrainian girl with dwarfism, who had 2 failed adoptions and was finally adopted in less than 24 hours by Christine and Michael Barnett. At first, they were told that the girl's age was not very clear, but that she was between 6 and 8 years old. However, Christine realized after a few days that the girl had pubic hair and was also hiding the fact that she had her period. But the terrifying thing about the case is that Christine claimed the girl put bleach in their coffee, and that she even saw her at night standing in front of her bed with a knife in her hand. This led them to run some tests on the girl, which determined, based on medical evidence, that the supposed girl was actually a woman who was 22 years old. A year later, the couple moved to Canada and left the girl alone in the apartment with a year of rent paid. But when no one was paying the rent anymore, the police went to evict her, and they realized that there was a 9-year-old girl living alone there who told them that her adoptive parents had abandoned her. Currently, the adoptive mother is facing trial for abandoning a minor, although she continues to insist that she did not abandon any girl, that the adoption was a fraud, and that the things she did were not typical of a child. Therefore, the official documents are being investigated, in which they say she is 22 years old. Currently, Natalia has been living with another adoptive family for 2 years, and it seems that she behaves completely like a child. Normal, deliver us from evil. Director Scott Derrickson brought us this movie, which is inspired by alleged supernatural events. The movie, starring Eric Bana, is about a skeptical New York police officer named Ralph Zarchi, who is forced to confront a case of demonic possession. The reality is that the movie is fiction to make it much more appealing to viewers. But it is actually based on the accounts from a book called Beware the Night, written by the real Ralph Zarchi. The real Ralph was a police sergeant who was completely skeptical about any kind of paranormal phenomena. However, after more than 16 years working in the Bronx, they decided to create a group within the police to investigate the many calls reporting alleged paranormal cases that were reported during the 90s. Ralph's position as a sergeant and also being a completely skeptical person made him the ideal candidate. As time went by and he investigated more and more cases, he began to see things that at times he couldn't explain, and he started to have more and more questions. In this way, he began to write a book telling the stories that happened to him. For example, one of the stories he told, and which, according to him, marked him the most, was that of Dominic and Gabby Villanova. What is still surprising about this case is how a completely skeptical police officer, he changed his views so radically to the point that he left the police force to dedicate himself completely to the demonic world and The Possession. The Possession is a supernatural horror film from 2012 produced by Sam Raimi. This film is based on the true story of a Dybbuk box which was supposedly haunted. The true story specifically centers on Kevin Mannis, a man who owned an antique shop and found an old wine box at a flea market. Mannis said that the seller told him the box had belonged to her 103-year-old grandmother and that she had nicknamed it the Dybbuk box, and she had always kept it hidden. The antique dealer found the story quite fascinating, so he bought the box and left it in the basement of his shop. After that, he says that all kinds of misfortunes started happening to him, to the point that one day he took it to his house. His mother lost her ability to speak in 2003, and although he never blamed the box for his streak of bad luck, he decided to sell it on eBay and someone bought it. Yosef Nifke, a person who wanted to remain anonymous and who would put it up for sale again shortly after buying it, adding to the ad description things like, since he has had the box, he has suffered a tsunami of bad luck. Jackson Haxton, who is the director of a university museum, saw the ad and couldn't resist buying the box for even a second. When it arrived, he got in touch with a historian who assured him that it was a box of Jewish origin, which was used in Jewish funerals to store some belongings of the deceased person with the intention that their spirit would remain inside it forever. Inside the box, there were indeed some coins, some locks of hair, and some small scrolls with symbols. Finally, an exact replica of the box was made, which is now on display in the museum, and the original, according to Haxton, was The Devil Doll. This movie traumatized hundreds of thousands of children back in the 90s. Obviously, it's fiction, since a doll isn't going to come to life like a human being. But nevertheless, it is actually based on a true story, specifically that of Robert Eugene Otto. It turns out that this boy received a gift from his nanny, who apparently was a woman who practiced black magic. Ever since he received the gift, Otto started talking to himself, and strange things began to happen in the house where he lived. Otto claimed that the doll had a life of its own, and some neighbors said they could see the doll in front of the window when no one was home. As stranger things kept happening, the parents decided to lock the doll in the attic. Many years later, another family bought the house, and by chance, the daughter discovered the doll, whose name was Robert. The girl told her parents that the doll had told her it wanted to get rid of her. And that's how Tom Holland, the director of the movie, was inspired to create it, The Rite. The movie follows seminarian Michael Kovach, a priest who is sent to study exorcisms at the Vatican, despite his doubts about this controversial practice. With his deep skepticism as his armor, Michael advises his superiors to seek help from psychiatry instead of demons possessing bodies. And that's when he is sent as an apprentice to Father Lucas, who is played by Anthony Hopkins, but in reality, Father Lucas's name is Gary Thomas, a priest chosen by the Vatican to be an exorcist, and who works assisted by a doctor, a psychologist, and a psychiatrist to identify those cases in which the supposedly possessed person does not have normal behaviors, such as mastering a language that the person did not know before. For a while, the priest was accompanied by Matt Baglio, a journalist who wrote the Rite, The Making of a Modern Exorcist. In this book, according to the journalist, he recounts that he witnessed all the events that are written here. He also stated that the rites are only used when all analyses and clinical examinations have failed. 9 Warren files. This movie tells a terrifying true story, which was also documented by the police themselves. The parapsychologists Eddie and Lorraine Warren faced an unprecedented case in the 1970s. The Perron family was a couple and 5 daughters who claimed that the house was possessed by some spirits which could be dangerous, especially for Mrs. Perron, who suffered strange injuries on several occasions. Their testimonies speak of unexplainable noises, doors that slam shut and open suddenly, and what seemed to be people's voices, but they always seemed to be heard in another room, besides a lobby chair that sometimes moved by itself. However, according to the family, the most disturbing presence was that of a supposed 19th century witch named Betsabe Sherman. This house was sold very cheaply to the Perron family after there had previously been a gas explosion, and the person in charge of restoring the house fled, leaving all his tools behind and didn't even come back to collect them. Finally, the Warrens went to help this family, and after making sure that what they said was true, they performed an exorcism on the house in the presence of the police, which apparently didn't help much since the Perron family eventually ended up moving out of that place. And all the owners after them have stated that to a greater or lesser extent, things happen in that place that have no... The entity, based on real events, the entity tells the story of Carla Moran, a woman who in 1974, and after not finding any kind of scientific help, she turned to a group of parapsychologists. When she was already completely at her limit, she said she felt harassed by some kind of superior force, which even went so far as to abuse her, leaving marks on her body. At first, when she told this, the doctors diagnosed her with a mental disorder, but after many tests, they confirmed that the woman was completely sane. After lengthy investigations, a team of scientists moved into Carla's home to document everything that was happening to her. Constantly in the photos taken of Carla, strange lights appeared surrounding her. At a specific moment, Carla screamed that she was in the bedroom, and when they arrived, she said it was right in front of her. At that moment, one of the journalists took a photo, and when they developed it, they saw that Carla's face was completely erased. The investigators reported that they could see a dimensional image that resembled 3 round lights, 1 yellowish green, and 2 white.